Hey guys, welcome back to the Chronically Informed podcast. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Brittany.
And this week we're going to go over Trump's crypto investments and schemes, as well as the recent Grand Platner allegation. We're also going to go over the recent news that Khanna was stopped by the IDF during his visit to Palestine. And sorry to say it, guys, but I'm also going to provide an Iran update. This week for local news, I spun the wheel and I got New Hampshire.
And I got Wisconsin. And it's a good news story, by the way.
Okay, so you're not just going to be a massive bummer.
Not this time.
That's great to hear. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started.
The first topic that we're going to get into is Trump's cryptocurrency income that was reported last year of $1 billion.
$1 billion? Last year. And just to verify, he's been president this entire time, right?
He has. That is correct.
Awesome.
Trump's total income last year was $2.2 billion.
Jesus.
Which, compared to 2024, where he only had $600 million of income, that's a massive jump.
That's a huge jump.
That is a huge jump.
Another small loan, I guess. I don't know. So I guess my question is, I see this a lot too, because I've seen a lot of reporting on like the cryptocurrency and all the different things that he's doing to like illicitly gain money in office. What about the people who continue to say and defend Trump over not accepting the presidential salary?
I see that repeated online so many times, and I've even had like family members of mine say the same thing. And
you look at the income that is being reported for this last year, he doesn't need the presidential salary, because how much is it? It's like
it's $400,000.
$400,000
from the last I checked. Yeah,
for any normal American, yeah, that's a big deal. However, Trump is not a normal American. Trump is very much part of the elite class. He had money before he got in office, and now he's only continuing to enrich himself.
Yeah.
Like nonstop.
Exactly. And 95% of Americans believe that the U.S. is suffering an affordability crisis right now.
Yeah, and it just seems a little, I don't know, uncouth. It seems a little not fucking chill.
It's super not chill, because have you heard all the times they say that affordability is a word made up by the Democrats?
Affordability, it's not a real word. They made up the word.
Just like groceries.
Yeah,
like these are things that he says that I don't understand how people can hear that and be like, you're so right. Everybody goes grocery shopping and they're worried about affordability in their everyday life. It's a very normal thing.
Yeah. He ran on the promise of no new wars, which we'll get into. And then he talked so much about fucking egg prices. He went on and on and on about egg prices and how they're going to lower egg prices and they're going to be the lowest we've ever seen.
Well, regarding egg prices, they are pretty low right now. I mean, when I went to the grocery store and I got those 3 things of eggs, they were $1.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But, not to give full credit, there was the bird flu going on. Do you remember that?
Vaguely, yeah.
Egg prices rose so much because all the chickens were dying.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it was a lot more expensive because there weren't as many eggs being made. So that's the only reason that egg prices have lowered under Trump. It has nothing to do with what he has done. It's the chickens stopped dying.
Well, good for the chickens.
Good for the chickens.
And good for us. We can afford eggs now. Nothing else, but we can afford eggs.
Nothing else.
So that's good.
Yeah. So that's a little bit frustrating.
So I want to go back to like the affordability part because one thing that I've seen a lot as well is that there was a bipartisan housing bill that was actually like supposed to help out with housing shortages, and it was going to pave the way for making building housing throughout the U.S. more affordable, more doable, remove some of the red tape. What happened with that?
Yeah, he essentially derailed it and put it on the back burner as a minor importance because he would rather focus on unproven claims of voter fraud and birthright citizenship.
And then also he was really focused on like passing the Save America Act, right? Like I hear him talk about the Save America Act nonstop. He said it during this 4th of July speech too.
Yes, he did. That's a whole other topic I could get into. I made a whole post on Instagram about the Save America Act. But besides that, let's get back on topic so I don't start ranting about something that I've already talked about. The issue with the crypto isn't that he is making the money, I say that he's enriching himself while everybody else is struggling. I mean, there was 2 acts. There was the Genius Act and the Clarity Act that were both crypto bills that he has signed and has pushed to pass over housing, affordability, our food prices, like oil, gas. all of these things are being pushed to the back in order to move forward his crypto.
Yeah, and one thing I will disagree with you on, I think that part of the problem is that he's making money. Because the way that the presidential seat is supposed to work is that you're not exactly what you're saying, basically, that he's enriching himself and he's pushing this legislation to make him and his friends richer. So totally agree with that. But I do think that him making money as the president is an issue. And he's certainly not the only one to ever enrich himself, but he is definitely the only president, at least in my memory, that has done it so blatantly, so fraudulently, so in your face, and just does not seem to care. And on top of that, the amount of money he's making is just simply unheard of.
So I agree with that. Let me rephrase what I was saying. I wasn't saying that him making money is like, oh, who cares? Make all the money you want. I'm saying that the main issue is the fact that he's enriching himself, not the dollar amount. Does that make sense, what I'm trying to say? Like, the fact that everybody else is being pushed to the side. I don't care about the dollars he's making. I care about the dollars he's making in comparison to all the stuff that the American people are losing and struggling with.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into kind of like the Democratic Party response to this for his like cryptocurrency earnings and things like that. Recently, some Democratic senators came out and said in a group statement, quote, "The disclosures heighten concerns about the president pushing Congress to pass crypto legislation in favor of the very industry he's cashing in on. The administration's moves to exempt cryptocurrencies and service providers from existing financial services, regulations, and its steps to weaken enforcement, including by disbanding the Department of Justice's National Cryptocurrency Enforcement Team." What do we think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it all goes back to the main point of this is that he is pushing this legislation in favor of the very industry he's cashing in on, which is what the senator said. And I think that's the most important part. They want to look into any fraud, essentially. Like, what are you doing? I mean, you've seen the allegations and the posts about insider trading.
I have,
in the White House.
Yeah, lots of that, especially relating to like the new betting markets and things like that come out, like the call sheet betting. Like there were issues with the Venezuela invasion as well, with some of the bombings of Iran, people putting massive amounts of bets on it and then the thing happening and them making a bunch of money. I've seen a lot of that.
And I'm not going to get into specifics because this isn't something that I've like researched fully, but his son was looking for information from that the wrestling commentator. Did you see that for the UFC fights?
No, I didn't actually.
He sent messages to he was a UFC fighter or like a professional wrestler. I don't entirely know, but I do know that he was a commentator on the sport, and he was asking him questions about like any tips on who I should bet for in this.
Okay, so kind of like a veiled attempt to try to get some inside info on how the fight was going to play out.
Exactly. Yeah. And then there was one time that Barron invested in something, and then the next day it like doubled or like raised or something like that. Yeah,
so really just kind of looking at an expanding pattern of Trump, his family, and his friends all using the office of president, the power that office brings, abusing that power to then enrich themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And that leads us into the complete opposite coming from the deputy press secretary. She said, neither the president nor his family has ever engaged or ever will engage in conflicts of interest. Actually, yeah, they have. And we have evidence of it. Like, there's legislation that proves that has happened. Insane. And she added, all actions by President Trump and his administration are taken in the best interest of the American people. And any so-called reporters pushing otherwise are recycling the same tired false narrative that Democrats and the legacy media have been pushing for a decade. Now, is it in the best interest of American people?
Probably about 4 or 5 of them, yeah.
For Trump to be making $2.2 billion while most people are struggling to eat, to find jobs, to find housing? The people themselves are struggling. And I know some people might hear this, most likely not, because once again, I don't see any hardcore MAGA people listening to this podcast. But if they do, some people might think, well, I'm fine. Sure, you might be fine, but you are not the majority.
That is true.
The minority group of people are really struggling and upset and living paycheck to paycheck. And one big event could make them homeless.
Yeah, and I would even go beyond saying that's the minority. I think that is the majority of Americans right now. I think that One thing that I've done a little bit of research into that's super interesting to me is kind of like the rapid dissolving of the middle class. You're really starting to get what places like The Economist, Financial Times, things like that, they call it the K-shaped economy. So if you picture the letter K, you have that bump in the middle that's like super tight. That's what used to be the middle class. And then you have the super wide part on the bottom and the super wide part on the top. And those are the two extremes of the America class system right now. So I would definitely say the majority of Americans are not benefiting from things like this and what he's doing.
Yeah, majority of Americans are not tied up in crypto and investments, and majority of Americans aren't doing awesome right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Many of you who keep up with the news, especially political news, have probably heard about the most recent Graham Platner allegations. If you haven't heard, Graham Platner is a Democratic, progressive Maine Senate candidate. Maine is a very important state for the Democrats to flip. So his campaign has gotten a lot of attention in the political sphere, both from Democrats and Republicans alike. Recently, Politico published a story interviewing a 41-year-old Maine resident named Jenny Rassicott, who detailed an allegation of rape against Graham Platner.
This wasn't the first allegation against him either.
No, it was not.
No, this is the second one in the exact same campaign. Not to mention the Nazi tattoo, which some people did, because this was probably one of the first things that came out about him, gave him the benefit of the doubt because he was in the service and he got this tattoo. Maybe he actually didn't know that it was a Nazi symbol at the time.
Yeah, I think that the big thing that a lot of people have been saying is that maybe there's some plausibility to the Nazi tattoo story. Some people have claimed that, like, from the beginning, I haven't liked him, and I do believe that for sure, because anybody with a Nazi tattoo is a little suspicious, regardless of the circumstances surrounding it, right?
Absolutely.
I don't necessarily know that I believe him when it comes to the case of when he found out that it was a Nazi tattoo. He tends to claim that it happened while he was on the campaign trail. In my opinion, just listening to the stories that have been told, it sounds like he may have found out sooner and then just kind of used it as a conversation piece. Like, I was stupid and drunk and look at this dumb tattoo I have. I got a Nazi tattoo. Ha ha ha. Things like that. I think that there is some plausibility there, but I don't necessarily believe him. But this is, unfortunately for Graham Platner, and really the people of Maine, this was just the first of many.
Yeah, and it's awful. And his campaign, as we found out after all this came out, repeatedly ignored warnings saying, look deeper into it. The vetting team told the campaign, you need to keep looking into this. This isn't a good idea. And they ignored him.
Yeah, and let's talk about the vetting team for a second.
Oh my gosh, what a bunch of fools they are.
Yeah, so basically the vetting team was paid, like $6,000 total to do a fairly quick turnaround investigation. So a lot of this stuff did not come up. Some of the things that seem to have come up were the Reddit post, which we'll talk about in a little bit, the tattoo that you mentioned, things like that, and maybe a little bit of the infidelity piece. There was also a piece in Politico before this most recent piece came out about the rape allegation that Graham Platner had been texting women and flirting with women that were not his wife.
Yes,
on the campaign trail. Yeah, very recently. So on the campaign trail. And the Politico piece had basically talked about Graham Platner and his wife saying that we had discussed this with our team before the election happened, and we were given the advice, let's not bring it up. Let's, just kind of write it out, see if anybody finds out about it, essentially. And they lost that bet. That's kind of how it was framed.
Yes, that's what it sounded like at the time.
Yeah, exactly. So this investigation team was paid a relatively small amount of money when it comes to, like, a background investigation. And was given a pretty short timeline to get this done, which is part of the reason why I think some of these allegations are coming out and were not known about before, were not addressed before.
Yeah, and people did say to Jenny, well, why would you come out now?
Right.
And of course, they accused her of being a Republican plant.
Which, honestly, indirectly, so did Graham Platner in his video.
Yeah, he absolutely did. He took zero accountability. And the first allegation was, I think, Fifield, Lindsay Fifield, may be how you pronounce that. I'm so sorry if I messed it up. But she alleged that he mistreated her, and then she was attacked because she was tied to the Republican Party.
Interesting.
Yeah. But Jenny came out and said, and let's start with her quote, one of the reasons I didn't come forward sooner was the huge moral conflict that I had between supporting his politics but not supporting him as a person. So that kind of throws away the whole Republican plant argument, because she's saying she had a moral issue with coming forward because she probably did think that his politics and his policies were going to be good for Maine. But as she said in an interview, these types of men are relying on women to stay silent, and she just couldn't stay silent anymore, even if that meant going against her own political beliefs that may have been good for her state.
Yeah, and rightfully so. I mean, as some of you know who may follow me on Threads or just kind of know me in person, I have been a advocate within the military for victims of sexual assault. And I'm happy that she came forward, regardless of the politics, regardless of what position he was in to potentially take the Senate seat in Maine. I'm glad that she came forward, because so many women don't, so many men don't even, so many victims do not come forward because, one, they're afraid they won't be believed, which we're already seeing being proven in even just social media. Republicans, even Graham Platner is just like casting so much doubt on the story, which, I mean, of course he is, because he's the one being alleged as a rapist. But the fact remains that women and victims in general just do not come forward because of this exact reason.
Exactly. And it's even more, I guess, disheartening to see people on, I'm going to say this very loosely, my own side, start to excuse these allegations because they want him to win as a progressive. Mm-hmm. It's really upsetting because they say, well, the Republican Party did it. Yes, and our president, the commander-in-chief, leader of the free world, is a convicted felon.
Yes.
And has been found liable in a court of sexual assault. Why are people on the left trying to make excuses for their side doing it? We need to hold these people accountable and remove them from office, not just because we want to win, but because there's a moral responsibility that everybody on the left claims to have until, well, we can look past it.
Yeah, the moral responsibility does not go out the window just because the current leader does not abide by it. The fact remains that the U.S. is a democratic nation that was based on a certain set of values, morals, and beliefs. And you don't just get to throw those out because one person did. You don't get to say, well, since this convicted felon is now running for president, we should also allow a convicted felon on our side to run for office. That's not how it works. I mean, Michelle Obama said it best. They go low, we go high. We maintain that standard because that is the basis of our party. That is the basis of our country, our constitution, our values, our ideals, all of it. You can't just throw it out the window just because somebody else did.
Exactly. And that's, once again, something I've already said on social media, why I don't out loud really identify with any particular party on the left, because each one has their own flaws, of course, but the second you identify as a leftist and then you see your own leftists excusing rape, it's like, wait a second, that's not something I stand for. That's not right. And then you're getting attacked for saying that.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to say this very directly to anybody who may be listening who holds these thoughts. We can do better, we will do better, and we must do better. We cannot accept people like this, men, women, anybody. We cannot accept people like this that are defunct in these moral values, that blatantly go against those things. We cannot accept an alleged rapist being the face of this movement, or any movement for that matter, whether it be MAGA, liberalism, communism, fucking centerism, it doesn't matter. You don't get to just put these people on platforms, because you know what that does? That empowers people to act the same fucking way.
Exactly. I have always believed, and you know what? It actually didn't come from Michelle, even though she said they go low, we go high.
Yeah, but I like Michelle.
No, I love it, but I have always stood by the fact that I will not stoop my morals down in order to make things better in that sense.
Exactly. There is a way forward, and supporting and putting a rapist on a platform is
It's
not
not
that
it.
way. Yep, absolutely.
The next topic that we're going to get into is about Khanna, who is, for those of you that don't know, a progressive member of Congress from California. He wanted to travel to the West Bank in Palestine because he thinks that it is important for an American politician to have an uncurated, extensive look at the occupation through the eyes of Palestinians, which I think is incredible. I think that it is good that a politician is actually trying to speak up about Palestine and not just bow down to Israel, which I have thoughts about.
So this all happened on Wednesday, the 8th of July, but the story was published by the New York Times fairly recently and was updated as of just a few hours ago. Khanna was visiting the ruins of a Palestinian village in the southern West Bank that was abandoned after a bunch of attacks from Israeli settlers and then eventually demolished afterwards, when suddenly a car full of men holding guns pulled up and then blocked the road. The men began taunting the congressman and his team, swearing at them in Hebrew and Arabic, as well as kicking the tires of their minibus, according to the New York Times. There is also a few photographs and videos of this encounter. The video is a very short, maybe like 2-second clip of basically these settlers just kind of being outside the vehicles that they were in. A little bit later, the IDF was called by the settlers. The IDF then came in and actually supported these settlers and ended up detaining the congressman as well as his team, which did include some New York Times photographers, for about 90 minutes. Mr. Khanna was quoted as saying the experience was the most frightening part of his 3-day trip that was organized by a member of his staff. And then in a statement on Saturday, a spokesman for the Israeli military said that it had received the report of Israeli citizens unlawfully blocking the vehicles of foreign nationals and members of a news media near the village, and then troops were dispatched and then reopened the road. The military is disputing, and this is the IDF, to be clear, not the settlers. The IDF is disputing that its soldiers had participated in blocking the exit and said that the identity of the armed civilians were currently being reviewed. So this is super interesting. I'm not sure how much you've been keeping up with this, Brittany, but a lot of recent polls that have come out, as well as just like general reporting as a whole, has started to show that a lot of Americans, both Republican and Democrats, are really souring on Israel. Mm-hmm. A lot of that has to do with their occupation of Gaza, the treatment of Palestinians, as well as now the invasion of Lebanon that they have been conducting in the guise of wiping out and disarming Hamas. Mm-hmm. So this is not good for Israel.
No, it's not.
Yeah, there's a few reports from the Times of Israel, which is, of course, an Israeli media source, which is actually fairly center of the road when it comes to speaking out against the current regime versus supporting it. So a few Times of Israel pieces have come out basically talking about Israeli officials, as well as most Israeli citizens, starting to kind of recognize and understand that the support that the U.S. is having for Israel is starting to erode, mostly because of the actions of the current Likud party, but more specifically Benjamin Netanyahu, as well as the defense minister Katz, who are both very, very pro-Israeli expansion, pro-Zionism, all these different things that has led to the occupation of Gaza, as well as the push into Lebanon and the fight against Hamas, which has killed multiple hundreds, if not thousands of people in both of those areas.
My question is, since the IDF denied being a part of the roadblock and detaining any visitors, do you think this would change any perspective that the U.S. has about their unwavering support for Israel and pretty much all costs? I mean, it's incredible that a progressive congressperson is going to see the damage anyway. I mean, He even said, I'm pretty sure the quote I read earlier, is that it's important for an American politician to have an uncurated, extensive look at the occupation through the eyes of Palestinians.
Yeah, so I would really hope that it changes the view that the wider government has on unconditional support to Israel. I don't think that the IDF denying anything really has anything to do with it. I think that even if it was just the Israeli settlers, this would still be a big deal because it's a sitting U.S. member of Congress being detained in a country that's supposed to be friendly, not only by the IDF, but being blocked and harassed and having guns pointed at them by just the citizens of that country that are supposed to be our friends, right? So as much as I would like to hope and really, really think that the U.S. government is going to look at something like this and say, hey, maybe this is the time to start scaling back support. Maybe this is the time that we really start to kind of make a break from Israel.
Or even have a conversation about it.
Or even have a conversation, because that's the big thing too, is it's not making a clean break from Israel necessarily, but more of having the conversation of how much support are we giving them? Because for decades upon decades, we've been just throwing money and throwing weapons and throwing all the support behind Israel for really no reason. And whenever any sort of legislation or anything was brought up to start to even discuss the fact that we give them so much money for relatively little in return, both strategically as well as materially, those things were immediately shot down by places like AIPAC, influencing congressmen and senators to shoot down these bills, by people immediately shouting, anti-Semitism and all these different things. So, again, I want to believe that this is something that could change the minds of the government. However, I think that this is a really slow process because this, quote, friendship has been in place for a very long time. The U.S. and Israel have been friends since not that long after the founding of Israel. So to so drastically change a relationship, while it may seem like it's easy in this current administration, just because that's what we've continued to do with some of our established friends, especially things like NATO and the UN, the relationship between the U.S. and Israel is, as much as I hate to say it, a special relationship that does take time to change. Now, one thing I do want to quote Khanna on saying is that after this event, he essentially was quoted as saying that, quote, "I have something unique to offer about the injustices of Palestinians, and I am going to go to every corner of America, regardless of whether I run for president or not, and tell their stories and tell the story of what is happening in the West Bank." So I think that in and of itself is going to be, assuming that Khanna, runs for president 2028, which, as much as I love talking about 2028, we still got 2 years. So we're getting there, and it might be a little early.
Away.
Yeah, it might be a little early to start speculating on who's going to run, who's not. But let's say that Khanna does run, and honestly, even if he doesn't, having a sitting U.S. member of Congress basically go around the U.S. and tell people about the plight of the Palestinians and how they're being treated, much like he was being treated, being detained for quite really no reason that we've been given. They were detained for like 90 plus minutes and didn't really give a reason as to why. So I think that him being able to do that, while it may not necessarily sway the government any which way, it will continue to really push the people of America, regardless of which party. It will continue to make that more bipartisan rethinking of our relationship something that's more prevalent in everyday American thought. Which I think is important because realistically, if Americans aren't going to think about something every day, there's not a very good chance that it's going to change, right? And there's a lot of people who have been tracking everything that's been going on in Gaza, everything that's been going on in Lebanon, and all these different things for a long time now. However, for a long time, those people were the minority, whereas not a lot of people were really informed about what was going on in Israel, or if they were informed, they just didn't really have an opinion on it.
Yeah.
I think that having a member of Congress be able to go around and kind of tell that story from both a personal standpoint as well as from a sympathetic standpoint, I think will put that on more Americans' radar, and I think that in and of itself will help that shift towards the reevaluating of the very weirdly special relationship that we have with Israel.
Absolutely, and it is super important that it's being brought to light because so many people refuse to talk about it. They refuse to take a stand against I'll say it, the genocide in Palestine and all of these awful things that Israel has done. I mean, this is going to be a good segue into our next topic, but the U.S. is in war with Iran for Israel, essentially.
Yes, we entered a war that we were not really given a very clear reason as to why. The prevailing sentiment is over Iran never having a nuclear weapon. However, there was also talks of regime change, which was evidenced by President Trump's tweets at the beginning of the war, talking to the Iranian people, telling them to rise up, overthrow their government. And then additionally, the stories of the CIA basically paying the Kurds, again, by the way, because we did the same thing in the Cold War, paying the Kurds again to try to start a popular uprising in Iran. We've been all over the place when it comes to why we started that war and kind of where it's going from here. And like you said, great segue into our next segment.
It is. And also, it reminds me of the book that I started reading yesterday. They mentioned Israel's issue with Iran possibly getting a nuclear weapon back in 2004 even. So this has been a repeated statement over and over again that we're getting in a war for it now because now it's an issue. They've been claiming that it's an issue forever. That's a long-standing thing that they've been saying.
Yeah, well, I think the issue is less of Iran getting the nuclear weapon because the way that the way that President Trump frames it is that he's saying that he's the only one who has been willing to do this in years and years and years. He's the only one who's willing to do it. I'm the only one who's willing to take the risk and fight Iran. But what he didn't really stop to consider is why hasn't anybody else done it? And I don't think that it was over any sort of fear of like Iran, decimating the U.S. military or anything like that. It was a fear over the fact of the things that have happened already in this war, which is Iran has closed the Strait of Hormuz. And not only have they closed the Strait of Hormuz, they've imposed significant economic cost on the entire world. They've been striking Gulf state countries, which has always been a very precarious balance in terms of relationships between the Gulf states and Iran. They've completely upended the balance in the Middle East because yes, Iran has always been a destabilizing power with the potential for nuclear weapons. But you know who else has been? Israel. Israel has always been destabilizing. Israel has nuclear weapons, and yet we don't take that stand against Israel, but we do against Iran, right? So the question was less of Iran has a nuclear weapon and we're terrified of them getting it, because clearly we're not, because Israel also has nuclear weapons. So we're not terrified of a Middle Eastern power having a nuclear weapon. We're terrified of, one, the wrong Middle Eastern power in terms of America, but two, we were terrified of what they could do, which they are now doing, which is impose a massive economic cost on the rest of the world and the Gulf states.
Yeah, and a result of that, gas is expensive, exports aren't moving through as they used to. Even in the first ceasefire, which, mind you, dead now. Or actually, no, maybe that's the second or third one that's dead now.
A lot, yeah. We'll have to do some research on how many ceasefires.
How many South spheres South
spheres? What the fuck is that?
English is a hard language, everybody. We'll have to do some research into how many ceasefires have actually been brought up and broken. But as of the most recent one that I can recall, he negotiated for us to pay them money for the Strait of Hormuz. Something that was previously open, previously free. Now all of a sudden, there's bombs in it. There's fees that are being enacted. We're giving Iran more of their money back. Yeah,
so really the bottom line here, because we should move on to the local news segment here, but the bottom line, I think, is things were better before this war. Whether it be prices, relationships, anything like that. Things were better before the war. Trump may be claiming the victory that, the Strait of Hormuz is quote unquote open, even though we know that it's not. But it was also open before the war of choice that you started. But the last point I want to bring up here is for everybody to consider something. Trump is right about one thing, which, sorry to say it, but he is right about one thing. And that is that America, quite frankly, is not being affected by the Strait of Hormuz closure in a way that would really, really hurt us. I challenge anybody who's listening to this, if you're really interested, look into current oil and gas prices in Southeast Asia. Look at the things that they've had to do just to stay afloat. Southeast Asia is being absolutely crippled right now because of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, because Southeast Asia, including China, but more importantly, the smaller countries around Southeast Asia that don't necessarily have the massive GDP of China, are struggling very, very, very hard because they rely on that oil to get through. They rely on those materials and all those other things. The U.S. can ship to Venezuela as we have. The U.S. can make deals with Venezuela on the oil and precious metals, which we talked about in the last podcast. If you haven't listened, go listen. The U.S. can do all these different things to mitigate these. Guess who can't? Southeast Asia. Or if they do want to mitigate those things, you know who they run to? China. You know why that's an issue? Because China is the number one adversary to the U.S., even if it's harder to see because we're not in a war with them. But that's all I wanted to say. I want to make it clear that yes, we are hurting in the U.S., but the people that this really hurts, aside from the people that elected Donald Trump, which again, we don't know how, but the people that elected Donald Trump is the rest of the world. Like, there are countries that are, like, economies are on the brinks of collapse because at the height of this war, they were getting absolutely nothing. Thank you, President Trump.
And people don't consider people in the rest of the world whenever they're supporting these actions. done by this administration. They think about themselves. They think, ugh, this sucks for me. But you have to think broader into how it's affecting the world, because all of that comes back to us eventually. We are the leading power in the world.
Yep. And what do you think happens if Southeast Asia collapses? Nothing good.
Nothing good.
Nothing good.
Absolutely nothing good. And so I think it's really important to, even if you are somebody that supports what's going on, look further than your living room.
Yeah.
Look further than your life, because as easy as it is to be selfish, once you understand the effects that the things that you're supporting on have on your fellow humans, a big quote for me, the only difference between us and them is luck.
Yeah.
Is 100% it.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I think that wraps up the Iran update. I told you guys in the first one, this is going to be a common theme. I'm going to be talking about the Middle East.
And China sometimes.
But not so much China anymore. I'm more of a Middle East guy now. But let's go ahead and let's move on to our local news pieces. We are going to start with Brittany and the great state of Wisconsin.
Getting into our local news from our respective states that we have chosen on our wheel, which is like our little shtick, you know?
Our shtick. That's what makes us different, guys.
We're so different.
Subscribe if you fucking love wheels.
If you love a little bit. You love shticks? You love bits?
Do you like whimsy?
Shticks and bits?
Sticks and Bits? That's a
new band
restaurant.
name. Oh. Anyway, I'm going to start out my Wisconsin news story with a quote from, honestly, a really important literary legend of our time. What you asking for? Put you in a mansion somewhere in Wisconsin. Like I said, ain't nothing to the pain. We can change the last name. What's happening?
What's happening?
Let me tell you what's happening in Wisconsin. Now, do you remember when ICE first started ramping up operations in our cities? How they were grabbing everybody off the streets, going to schools, churches, hospitals, etc.
Yeah, one of the grossest misuses of power that this country has seen, yes.
Of course. And another big story is that they were going into courtrooms and grabbing people going to immigration hearings. Which, of course, yet another very gross misuse of power. People are trying to do things the right way. They're going to court for their immigration hearings. They are doing the right legal thing. And ICE agents are chasing them there to capture them before they go in front of the judge. So there was a judge in Wisconsin. She's a former judge now because she did resign after this. But if anybody remembers that story, she was convicted of felony obstruction for helping a Mexican national evade U.S. ICE agents at a Milwaukee County courthouse. So the ICE agents came in with an administrative warrant and tried to detain a defendant. And instead of allowing the arrest, she ushered him through a back door to try to get him out of there.
So she really went out of her way to protect somebody who was trying to do the right thing.
Yes, and even though what she did, when it comes down to brass tacks, was illegal, she did the right thing because she knew that he was trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, and all she was trying to do was really just uphold the right to every person in America to a free and fair trial by a jury of their peers, and to not get accosted by immigration agents while you're at the courthouse where your immigration case is being heard.
Exactly. And this did lead, I don't know if it was this incident exactly, but ICE agents are no longer, I mean, they weren't to begin with, but there was legislation passed for them not to be able to enter courtrooms to try to arrest people.
Good. Okay.
Yeah, so that did pass, which was great. And yeah, she actually was indicted and found guilty in December, but the judge that was trying her case, decided against prison time because she has no criminal history. Her act was not anything that would have resulted in personal gain. And they said that she was an otherwise stand-up citizen, and what she did was trying to be selfless for somebody else. Good. So I think they gave her I wrote it down somewhere. I think it was a $5,000 fine. It was something not great, but doable.
Yeah.
And yeah, they pretty much said, you are a good person. You did what you did to try to help somebody that you believe needed help. And so you don't have to go to prison.
Great. So you were right. This is a good news story.
It is a good news story.
Yeah, we're not just being total bummers.
No, it's great news coming out of Wisconsin. It's a selfless judge doing her job for the people,
Good.
Which is exactly what we want to hear.
And it's exactly how it should be, really.
Yeah. And so when it came to the trial itself, her lawyers argued during her trial that Donald Trump's administration sought to crush her in an effort to ensure judicial compliance with ICE targeting immigrants as they showed up for their court hearings. So they didn't go, hey, you know what? That was illegal. They're like, no, we're going to arrest her and crush her because how dare she try to get in between ICE showing up to court hearings of people trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, just really double down on the already horrendously wrong thing that you're doing.
Exactly. Yeah. And we have judges and leaders in the court and all branches of government, I would say, that are really trying to stand by the oath that they took for those positions. Of course, there are some that are not, but like our girl, Judge Khanna, she stood by it. And I think that's a nice little piece of good news is, you know what? Actually, it's not super good news because the guy did get detained. Like when it first happened.
Yeah.
But I think it's good news that there are judges that are trying to stick up for the people.
Right.
And she did not get penalized with jail time because of it.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. That was happy.
It was happy.
And for my story today, we're moving over to New Hampshire. So this happened yesterday on July 10th. The Democratic candidate for governor, Cindy Warmington, said that she is outraged that the Trump administration will reportedly be sending election monitors to New Hampshire for the upcoming primary election. This is coming after a lawsuit that was filed by the Department of Justice to obtain private voter data held by the Secretary of State was thrown out of court. Warmington is contending that the monitors are an act of intimidation. I'm going to quote Cindy Warmington, quote, "We have free and fair and transparent elections in New Hampshire. We don't have problems, and the U.S. Department of Justice has said they've identified these locations because we've had problems in the past. We have not. We need to make sure that every single Granite Stater has the right to exercise their right to vote." And this seems to be just the latest installment of Trump's attempts to interfere with the midterm elections by deploying monitors and wards to all sorts of voting locations, typically through Democratic and purple states, so that he can then claim election fraud to potentially have the Republicans win the midterms, even though all the numbers, all the polls are showing that they by no means should. And why is that? Because of the actions of the current Republican president, Donald J. Trump.
And not to mention, there are plenty of credible sources and factual numbers that prove that voter fraud is not an issue. It is not a widespread issue. There was a unit in the Department of Justice. And now, mind you, this was in the early 2000s.
Okay.
But they were able to prove that 0.0000013% of ballots cast were fraudulent. And this is out of 80 something million. Within 22 states, Kansas Secretary of State, they reviewed 84 million votes cast. 14 instances of voter fraud out of 84 million.
Yeah, and even the numbers now, I mean, there's been a couple of studies conducted more recently as well, based on what Donald Trump has been saying, talking about like rigged elections and trying to then combat them by inserting his own Department of Justice into those elections. Even those numbers are still saying less than a percentage point.
Yep, less than a percentage point. Over the last 25 years, 0.0000845%. Yes. No election outcome has ever been altered by ballot fraud. And isolated instances of voter fraud do not constitute a widespread trend. I mean, how can you rationalize this issue of illegals voting, voter fraud, they're rigging elections, when you have power over all three branches of government? If there was voter fraud by the Democrats, you would not have won. If fraud was actually happening, you would not have won. So I mean, of course, I understand why he's saying these things. People should not be monitored or scared into voting any which way.
Yeah, there should never, ever, ever be voter intimidation. That's one of the reasons why voter intimidation is illegal. It was something that the mob used to do years and years ago, which was intimidate, judges and voters and things like that to kind of affect the outcomes that they want. And it was made illegal, and it's been illegal ever since. And apparently it's fucking working up until this most recent president, Donald Trump, who decided that because he lost the 2020 election, that suddenly every American election is now rigged. The ones that he wins are never rigged, of course. But the one that he lost is rigged beyond all belief, and the election system is no longer reliable. All these different things. And all this does is show a continued descent into fascism. Because some of the hallmark indicators of a country descending into fascism include elected or fascist leaders basically saying that the democratic system is not working. We saw this a lot in South America. One of the ways that we saw it happen was actually in Venezuela. Nicolas Maduro was elected into power by the people, and then he basically started this descent into the current election system actually doesn't work. These things don't work. We have to reform all of this. And that was how he justified his rise to be a fascist dictator of Venezuela. This is the beginning of that. And the fact that not only is this happening, but Trump is being able to weaponize the Department of Justice, which is supposed to be a bipartisan section of the U.S. government that is focused entirely on delivering and executing the law in the way that it's supposed to be, in a way that is fair to all Americans, and a way that is not partisan in any way, is now completely partisan under Donald Trump and is basically his personal weapon when it comes to fixing things that he doesn't like or fixing rulings in his favor. Trump has weaponized the government. He has tried repeatedly, him and Hegseth have tried repeatedly to politicize the military, politicize the Supreme Court, politicize the Department of Justice, politicize the FBI, the CIA, any institution that you can possibly think of that by law should not be politicized has been politicized under Trump, or at least has been attempted to be.
Exactly. And this is just another instance, which I'm pretty sure that I'm going to say this sentence a lot over the course of our podcast, of this administration taking an issue that is almost non-existent and making it into this giant conspiracy fraud issue to distract from all of the wrongdoings. You know what's not affecting our country? 39 cases of voter fraud, over 100 million votes casted. That's not affecting our country. You know what's not affecting us? Him saying that Haitians are eating dogs and cats.
Don't say that in front of Bagel.
Sorry, Bagel. That has nothing to do with what's going on right now. You know what's not affecting our sports? 6 trans people in collegiate sports is not affecting anything. None of these things are actually affecting our lives, and they are being presented as these major issues that are running over the streets, when in reality, nobody would even pay any mind if they weren't being shoved down their throats like they were a bigger issue than they really are.
Thank you so much, guys, for listening to our second episode of the Chronically Informed podcast. I want you guys to know one of the things that we're editing out is Brittany saying, you're going to hear mostly from Aaron on this subject because I'm just here. I want you to know that, and I will save that clip. So if the allegations ever come, I have the proof, all right?
We're editing it out because I want to.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Later.